welcome everybody. Welcome to Big Bang. Here we are in a rainy morning in Dallas, and but we're excited to be here. Excited to be at the Big Bang conference, day 3, Wednesday. We're having all these virtual sessions, and we're excited today to be focused on healing in our economy, and specifically sort of what's going on in our environment and how do we bring systemic change in our community. So thank you for joining us here today. Today we're going to spend some time really deconstructing a lot of these terms we hear today, particularly in corporate America, but also in nonprofit. CSR, ESG, DEI, ABC. No, I'm just teasing. But there's a lot of acronyms, and so we're excited to have a panel here today that is going to help us understand those a little bit better and really dig in and see what's real, maybe, and what isn't. So thank you for joining us today. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Michelle Riddell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Something Good Consulting Group. It's a corporate social responsibility firm. We help businesses and nonprofits really try and grow their capacity and their impact, as well as their organization. I'm also a proud SVP Dallas partner, and also serving on the board of directors, having just served as board chair last year. So it's a real honor for me to be here today. What I'd like to do is kick it off and let our panelists introduce themselves. I did mention it's raining here in Dallas, right? So those of you in Dallas know that's probably a good thing. But like for so many things, sometimes that creates some unexpected things. So we are missing one panelist right now, but she promises she's on her way. And so we're going to let her just slip in when she gets here. So if you see a little shuffling in chairs, you'll know what's going on. So let's go ahead and get started. So Aimee, excited to have you here today. We've known each other for a while, but let's let you kick it off with introductions.
My name is Aimee Griffiths. I currently am head of social impact at Moneygram International. I came to Moneygram about 4 years ago. Just before I came to Moneygram, I was COO at Cafe Momentum, a wonderful cause. It's how I became kind of a part of this SVP family through my work there. Still very supportive of Cafe Momentum and all my friends there. But when I came to Moneygram International, it was very based on, it was acting like many corporations at the time in the 2000s and 2010s of a lot of transactional philanthropy. Coming on as a head of foundation, and where the traditional social impact was more, let's give a straight donation, let's make a huge check, stand in front of it and take pictures and really do something good for the communities where we have our stakeholders. And I'm just really proud to be where I am now, because the company in late 2019 allowed me to expand my role to include more of our corporate philanthropy as just one of the many pillars, one of them being diversity, equity, inclusion, corporate philanthropy, global volunteerism, and overall ESG matters. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, great. We're
Thank
so
you.
excited to have you. All right, Elizabeth.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Ramirez-Washka, and I work for the Boy Scouts of America. I've been there for years, and I'm their Chief Diversity Officer. So we're in an exciting time as we're making several changes. We're a 111-year-old organization, so lots of tradition. So bringing in DEI and how it's relevant to our organization and how it works with our youth, our volunteers, and our employees. So glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go ahead and dig in. As I mentioned, we'll invite Shani to join us just as soon as she makes it. We want her to make it here safely. So I mentioned sort of deconstructing all these terms. We hear a lot about it in my business. I talk to a lot of stakeholders, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, and sometimes almost sort of on the side, they'll say, what does that really mean?
Right.
You know, so if they're honest, we sort of have an assumption. We all work in this space,
Right.
So have a basic understanding of these things. But I think broadly speaking, people are still sort of figuring that out. So let's start with you, Aimee. You're on the corporate side of things, so where there's probably a lot of intersection in these areas. So from your perspective, what are the similarities in these things, and what are the differences?
Well, what I know to be true now will evolve in the next 20 minutes because it's a fast-moving field, thankfully, because it's growing as the need grows. ESG, from where I live, is there are two different kinds of ways to look at ESG: environmental, social, and governance. I always like to say that there's ESG, capital ESG, which is the more formalized reporting, that you're using the structured formalized reporting frameworks such as SASB or GRI, or and there's just to show a health of the company behind the financials for investors and for the general public. It's you need third-party assurance. It's very regulated. And then there's lowercase ESG, which is environmental social governance, which is more like corporate social responsibility or corporate citizenship. And it's more of a qualitative kind of way of looking at it and telling your story and what you hope to do to leverage your networks and platforms and systems to make a difference in the communities of your stakeholders. And within ESG, the social, the S, is a huge piece of that, is your human capital, is your commitment to diversity, is your commitment to inclusion and belonging. And so that's how it works for us at Moneygram.
Nice. How about you, Elizabeth?
Yeah, what I do is the basics. I think what people need to do is understand what each terminology is. You understand that, put it in the boxes, and then know where your culture is, and then framework it in there. But basically it comes down people, environment, and what you're trying to do. And so from a nonprofit, we're looking at it from our employees and volunteers and educating them on DEI. From an environmental perspective, in the scouting, we have leave no trace when they go camping, leave it how it is. Right. So it's just interacting, but I think it's crucial that you understand the definitions and understand your culture. If not, you overcommit, you do too many things, you don't know what you're doing. So that's what's crucial, I think, is understand the definitions, look at them, take a step back, understand your culture.
So if I'm inside an organization and I'm not sure what's really going on in my organization, sort of how they're addressing that, what's your advice for maybe employees or stakeholders to maybe start asking questions and hold organizations accountable for these sorts of things?
So I can start from my perspective. It's having the office chief diversity officer, but if you don't have that, is going to your upper management and saying what are you doing in this space. Looking on your website, we have a DEI website that talks about what we're doing in that space. A lot of times in the corporate world, you have reporting on how we look, corporate responsibility. But just asking questions, part of it, a lot of corporations, even nonprofits, have employee resource groups, which are different groups that talk about the different issues or concerns they have with their organization.
I think making sure you're putting out there as a company from the corporate side, making sure you're sharing with your employees your journey. We're at the very beginning of our journey. Like I said, my role as social impact only really was birthed in end of 2019, and we're still building out that framework of what it means, and we're really making a concerted effort to share with our employees on a day-to-day basis, either through our intranet or through our direct communications with employees, to talk about the things that we're taking on and what are important, and inviting them to the conversation. So if you're not hearing those things from your company, then yeah, definitely ask questions of your management and ask how you can help. I think that's a lot of times when companies are starting this journey, or organizations starting this journey, there's so much to take on. We were just talking about that earlier. Environmental, social, and governance. That's a huge bite to take out of what you're trying to do, and suggestions and resources are always going to be welcome.
So, by the way, I forgot to mention that I have a former life, actually a long former life, before starting Something Good Consulting Group, and worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas and led our corporate social responsibility efforts there. And so I have some experience sitting in that role. But I know one of the things is that it's often a small team that is sort of tasked with these responsibilities, yet it takes the whole organization getting involved. So what are some things that you've seen, ways that organizations, either that you've been a part of or some things that you've observed, have had some success, but also some mistakes, some common mistakes? I know, Elizabeth, you're with an organization that has been through a significant crisis, and so you're starting to kind of work your way out of that. So what is it that you think has been learned, and what can we share with our audience that would be helpful in that regard?
Again, I come back to cultures, really understanding who we are, but what's helped me, I've been in this role a year, and then I have someone working for me, so there's only 2 right now, but is listening and having volunteers, employees, and being open and having access and using them and utilizing them to be part of the movement. In a nonprofit, employee resource groups are really key to us also because they give you ideas, they give you different perspectives, and that has helped. We've been very fortunate. We're in a journey, traditional organization, but where we have our CEO, our board very committed to the change, and volunteers committed to the change. Is there struggles? Of course there is. I think we're in a period right now in society where people are divided. Don't tell me what to do. And so it's having that message, listening, having advocates and champions for you as individual contributors that are professionals, volunteers that are out there that help message with you. So it's a village. It's not just yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
I think for somebody in our field, our shared field, gave me a really great tidbit that I always think about when things get frustrating or you just want to move quicker or it's just taking longer. It's like pushing rope in some instances when you really want to get people on fire to make great change and they're just not ready for change. She said to me, in this role, you have full accountability, but often no authority. And I'm like, that's probably the biggest challenge of this. And sometimes it comes from a not positive place because there's a resistance to change, and sometimes it just comes from a place of not understanding the importance of it and the value of it. And I think that's where, again, knowing your culture, knowing what you're taking on, and knowing how to negotiate that and navigate it is really whether or not you're going to be successful or determine whether or not you stay in that role.
So in my work, I meet organizations that are at all different places, right? Some who are sort of really wanting to be leading edge in this type of work, describe themselves as social enterprises. So almost their very existence is to do good, well in their business model. And yet you have some more traditional organizations that haven't had to perhaps think about these things and are now understanding that they are. Right. So, for those more traditional organizations where maybe there's at least an understanding, we have to do something. What's your advice for them? Where do they start? Because it can seem overwhelming, and it's my experience with some organizations that I talk to.
It is overwhelming. Yeah. I think, again, going back to the relationships that you're building, asking questions, really getting a sense of where the organization or company is at that time. It's really easy to pass judgment on and to make assumptions, but to really get in it and really find out what's going on underneath the surface with the company, and then being willing to have those open conversations. I think, too, is just understanding what kind of bandwidth you have to take on. You know what, we talked a little bit. I want to turn this over to you because you had some really great, really narrowing in on what could make a difference and what you get really traction on.
We're a traditional organization, so to be relevant, we need to understand what our culture is and what we're doing. So for us, it's prioritizing. For us, it's educating our youth about the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion. That's a start where it helps even the parents. The adults are having the issues more with the DEI space, with all these changes. It's the youth that are embracing it. So us, it's like empowering our youth, educating our volunteers about DEI. That's very basic and fundamental to who we are. We have a lot more work to do, but you have to prioritize it. And I think that's where it gets overwhelming. If you want to do everything, you do nothing. And you have to do it well. Right now, we're introducing a merit badge, which is basically educating the youth on DEI and spending the time with the volunteers, with the professionals, how this is going to work, what it's going to do. That is going to be everlasting rather than doing 15 things that look great but really don't do anything.
Yeah.
And also another thing is to work with those with your leadership and find out what you envision. What is it that you're really seeing? Because in the ESG space, you may be seeing an outcome that they aren't seeing, and so making sure there's that understanding of where do we want to go. What's the finish? There's really no finish line because we should always be improving. But what is your ideal? What does it look like? And let's see what it takes to get to that point.
Yeah, it's able to pivot too. I think we get fixated in this space. You have to be willing to say, this isn't working, we need to pivot, and have those candid conversations with your executive leadership team saying, we thought this would be a great idea, it's not working, we need to try something else and going forward. There's not a failure, it's success as long as you keep on going forward.
All right. Hello, Shani.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well.
Good. Good. You are here. You are here. All right. So I told you all we had another panelist who would be joining us. She has made it here safely, and that's the main thing, Shani. So we're excited to have you. And the name of this type of work, isn't it? It's flexibility.
Yes.
And agility.
Right.
Yes.
And
yes.
so we're all experts at that. I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So let's just pause here for a second, and please introduce yourself.
Sure.
And sort of the perspective that you're going to jump in and give our conversation.
Yes, going to
today.
jump right in. So I'm Shani Barrax-Moore. I use pronouns she, her, and hers, and I have been a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner for over 20 years. I started when I was 5.
Exactly. Yes.
And I spent a lot of my time, well, first I moved from a career in public relations and kind of said that I tripped and fell into diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I've spent